there. I'm trying to make a video. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. My name is Jess, and today is a garden tour day. So I do these videos every weekend during the season. Now in the pre-season time, it's more like every couple of weeks when there's something to show. These are a really cool grid to look back on, so if you are now binge watching the videos like midsummer or maybe next winter, you'll be able to really see how much change can happen. Today we're just going to walk around. I'm going to show you kind of what has come up, what's new, what varieties are growing, and what we're about to do, because this next week we're planting all the tomatoes. Like everything is going to go in, and we are really going to be like kicking off the spring season. So exciting. So if you're new here, I'm growing in Central Arkansas, Zone 7B. We do have a large garden. We grow in different ways, all of which are natural, organic growing methods. And we just grow for our family. We don't sell our produce or anything like that. I do a lot of preserving and of course sharing here on YouTube how to do things. So it gives me kind of an excuse to experiment. All right, let's take a look in this garden. So I want to pause here at my arbor rose, which I've got these two rose bushes here. They're a couple years old. They're filling out and they'll start setting buds here really soon. I'm so excited to see these lush and blooming. Now here I've got a couple of roses. These are a year younger than the ones by the front gate. So you can see they're not quite as established. Now I've started putting some things out into the Perennial Garden, the cottage garden here up at the front, but mostly what's been going on here is I've just been letting things come back up. So it's kind of weedy right now. Check out those hollyhocks, they're massive. But I've just been waiting to see what's going to volunteer and reseed from last year. But here I have some different roses. I have lots of cosmos volunteering here. There's some yarrow, different dahlias popping up. That's what these are. And while there are a lot of weeds in here, there also are a lot of cosmos. So I'll just have to come in and weed out what I don't want. Gladiolas back there. I see some zinnias growing. And my idea for this garden was to have perennial things as well as annual varieties that really readily reseed. And my vision for this was to eventually be a space that would be very wild and free, but have edibles throughout it. So the irises are blooming here. And the herb spiral is full. Look at this thyme flowering, isn't that pretty? And over here, my asparagus bed is in its second year. Looking pretty glorious. We've harvested some of them, but we've let a lot of them go, so this can get well established. On the front porch, my cold hardy Greenstalk, the leaf planter full of leafy things, is looking pretty stinking majestic, if I do say so myself. And here I've got rainbow chard. You can see some of it's been picked. We've started picking some greens for salads. Romaine lettuce, red romaine. Here's more chard. I've got a few different colors of that. There's a pretty yellow one. I've got some spinach in here, and all of these things are looking really good. Over here is the strawberry patch, and all of these strawberry plants used to be in a kiddie pool down at the end there. And after 2 years, the kiddie pool was still in good shape and had held up. However, the strawberries were running all out of the kiddie pool, and they were attaching to the ground around the kiddie pool. So we decided to pull them all out and break them up, and hopefully they'll fill up this whole space next to the greenhouse. It's looking pretty promising. I mean, they've only been planted in there for like 5 or 6 weeks after being broken up, and they're covered in blossoms. I'm really excited about that. Over here I have some peonies. I always say this and it sounds like panties. That's country girl problems. Peonies. And then this whole row here is blackberries, and I was actually just noticing this morning that we're starting to get blossoms on the blackberries as well. So this is going to be setting fruit soon, and we're going to be picking a lot of berries this early summer. And we'll take a quick peek in the greenhouse because it won't be as lovely on our next garden tour. A lot of this stuff that is making the greenhouse so awesome right now is going to be moved out to the garden. So I've got the peppers up there. I'll still have a little bit of time in the greenhouse. Lots of tomato plants that are going to be put out soon, as well as tomatillos and ground cherries. Lots of flowers and herbs. Some young cucumber starts. I didn't start as much this year as I have in the past because I didn't sell plants. So probably 85% of what you see here will go in my garden. Some of this is for friends. But I have a big garden and we have a lot of space, and so you have to start a lot of plants to fill a lot of space. Now, I'll be more thorough over in that garden when more stuff starts coming up here soon. But today I want to kind of quickly move into the vegetable garden area. And since it's the beginning of the season, I kind of want to explain a little bit of how I garden. And I like doing this in garden tours because this is a format where I get to share what I'm so passionate about, which is gardening, but I get to kind of give you some hands-on experience and share how things grow, why, and you can kind of see firsthand. Now, as we go through today, I want you to kind of notice there are some weeds coming up in my beds. I didn't go through and pull those before this tour because right now my beds are not mulched. Now, there is a window at the beginning of every season where we have amended our beds by adding a couple of inches of compost, just laying it on top. We don't till it in. I do not disturb the soil in these beds. So they all have a fresh layer of compost, but they're not planted yet. And so the weeds are ferocious. It's starting to get warm. Of course, now I've just fertilized them. And because the soil is not covered with some sort of mulch, the weeds really start to grow. And I don't even bother pulling them until I'm ready to put mulch down. Now, if I'm trying to plant a specific area, I'll come in and pull the weeds out. But I don't stay on top of weeding at this time. What we will do is, as we plant seeds and the seeds begin to germinate, and after I transplant all those plants in the greenhouse out into the garden, I'll come through and we'll mulch everything with straw. I like to use straw mulch, and I put a few inches down, and you'll see a little bit of straw mulch on some places in the garden. And at that point, we will weed everything and mulch it heavily, and that will greatly suppress the weed growth. Soil does not like to be naked, so if you don't put some sort of covering on it, it will grow something to cover itself. This is probably one of my favorite times in the garden, like right now at the very beginning of spring, because the garden is so pregnant. Like you know that it's about to explode and be so beautiful. But right now it's just expectant, and the weather is lovely, and I don't know, this little, it's like a little tiny window. After everything's amended, a lot of stuff is planted. There are seeds in the garden we're not gonna see yet because they're not up. And I really love it. So right here in the entry of the garden is the first arch trellis. We have 13 of these in this space. But I would love for you guys to tell me what you'd like to see planted on this trellis. I like for it to be kind of dramatic. I tend to kind of go towards like noodle beans. I've done Kajari melons here before. What would you like to see right in the entry of the garden? And I will plant what is the general consensus right here. Now here I have some beans, which these actually volunteered. It froze lightly and they did get some damage, but it didn't freeze enough to fully kill them, which is cool. Like some of them did end up dying, but most of them were fine. I pulled out the ones that were all shriveled up. So now I just need to come in and thin them, and I'll probably move some around. As you can see, they're getting to the point of climbing though. So I'm gonna have a little head start on beans. I don't know what's what here. This was purple potted pole beans and rattlesnake pole beans, so it'll be some of those probably. On the other side there, I've got some French breakfast radishes. When I plant radishes, because I like to roast them, I usually plant like enough for a dinner altogether. And if I want, I can come out and harvest a couple to throw on a salad or slice up and put on tacos. But mostly right there, that's one whole tray of roasted radishes for my family. Of course, I'm feeding quite a few people, so you don't necessarily have to make that many. But that is something I do when I'm planting things like that, is I'll just succession sow them, and I'll plant little clusters of them here or there. So I know what I'm gonna do with them when I put them in the ground. So I know that that's like a side for a dinner one night. I'm like, oh yeah, I have those radishes. I can come out and just harvest all of them, quarter them, put some oil on them and salt, and put them in a 400-degree oven, and I just put it with something we're eating for dinner. Here I've got another arch trellis that I'll plant. Haven't decided what's gonna go here yet. And down on the end, just coming up, well, these are Beauregard sweet peas from row 7 seeds. That's a really pretty purple pea. I might have been a little late on putting those in. It really just depends on how quickly it gets warm this year. Here are chives, which have been in the garden for a few years now, and they're really lovely. You can see here we're about to have a blossom open. I love chive blossoms. They look like truffula trees. There's a couple more. And these are really cool. You can harvest these chive blossoms and soak them in vinegar to use in like salad dressings. And it's just really pretty because they're purple and fluffy looking. All right, we're actually gonna turn around down here because it's really muddy. This bed is lots of onions. That's what all of these are. I need to mulch them a little heavier because we're starting to get some weed growth in here. This grass is the worst. Not the time. I'm gonna leave it alone. But yeah, this is like a few hundred onions right here. And this massive carpet of thyme started as a tiny little start in my garden, I don't know, 4 years ago or something like that. Here at the end of this bed are some brassicas, which there's some broccolis and some cabbages here. And again, this is really dependent on it being cool enough for them. I don't know what it'll be. Planting brassicas in the spring here in central Arkansas, where it can get really warm really fast, is such a gamble. Now, last spring was cool and it stayed cool. It froze late and my brassicas were amazing last year. It's the first year I've had such a successful spring brassica harvest. Usually they do better in the fall here. But I went ahead and threw these in just on the off chance that they might do well. They might produce nothing. They might go straight to seed. And it was a risk I was willing to take. This bed, now that we're getting past our frost date, is going to be planted with all zinnias. I got to pull out this brassica guy down here. This was a volunteer that lived through our really cold freeze completely uncovered and now has started to go to seed. Here in these middle 2 beds, I've got some variegated thyme here. Some weeds that are extremely persistent. Here are dahlias, which also made it through our freeze and they're coming back. They're a variety, I believe it's called Cream de Cassis. I'm not 100% sure. That's just what someone told me. I got them like in a clearance bin from Walmart, like end of season. Some of the stuff that I have in my garden, like I have my David Austin roses, like I have some fancy things. And then I have a lot of, you know, box store, end of season, clearance, closeout. Like I think I paid $1 or something like that for these tubers at the end of the season. Threw them in, they did nothing. I didn't even know they would come back the next year, and they did. And they've been there now for the last few years and they're just beautiful. I was really happy they made it through the freeze. Over here, I have some beets, which actually need to be thinned out. When I planted these, I used seeds that were like 4 or 5 years old, and so I planted them a little thickly because I was concerned about the germination. I want to say the seeds were like 4 years old. Obviously my concerns were unwarranted and there was no need to plant these so thick. Whenever you're thinning, you can save these and throw them on a salad because these are just little baby beet greens. Down on this end of this bed, I've got some plastic down because I have really bad nut sedge problem down here. So I'm hoping that by doing this, it'll help. When we take this off in another, I don't know, probably 2 weeks, I'll probably wait till the beginning of May, very end of April, to take this off and lay down some cardboard and cut holes out of it. I'm probably gonna plant squash or melons or something on this bed that I can put cardboard down and let it grow on top of. Oh, I forgot to finish over here. Now here, if you'll notice, I have a very persistent curly mint making its way that was in a pot because I'm constantly telling people to contain the mint so they don't end up with this problem. Do you see how I'm doing? I need to stop. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. See, I do this and I hate throwing this away. I hate throwing away good plants. I'm gonna take it back here to where I've banished the mint to the mint and lemon balm bed. I can join its kind here and grow to its heart's content, to mint contentment. I'm try not to get too distracted. The sun is going down. I don't have all the time in the world here. Here I have some Clematis that is coming up. It looks like it's gonna start blossoming here soon. I have very high hopes for this being very beautiful right here. Looks like this one's about to give us our first blossom. This is a blue one. John Paul, if I remember correctly, is what this is called. Same thing going on over here. I really would love for this to be just beautiful and ornamental. Now, I like to grow ornamental things among the vegetables. When I first started gardening, I didn't know anything about like gardening styles or anything like that, but I was really of the mind that if I'm gonna have to be in a space a lot and do a lot of work in it, I want it to be pretty, and I've always felt that way. I really struggle with like focus and distraction sometimes as my kids go zooming by on their bikes. But I'm just really inspired by beautiful spaces. I'm inspired when I feel wooed. I'm so much more creative. I work so much harder. And that was my thought in kind of sharing my vegetable garden space with pretty things that they don't feed us, but they inspire me to work hard to feed us. But after I started gardening, I learned a term called potager, which is French and it really just means kitchen garden. The history of potager gardening, it originated with French monks centuries ago. At the monasteries, they would create these potagers, these gardens where herbs and medicinal plants and flowers that attracted pollinators and vegetables were all interspersed together. And the idea was to make a reflective, beautiful, functional space. And as soon as I read about potager gardening, I was so validated because I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. This is what I'm creating. And so when you see things like clematis vines, like there's not a benefit per se of these plants other than the fact that they make this space beautiful and they make me want to be in it. And the more that I'm in my garden, focused and working and wooed, the better my garden's gonna grow, which makes the space that I give to the pretty things totally worth it. And it's also true that pollinators are really important, and so planting things that bring the pollinators to your garden is very much a practical benefit. All right, so here I have another little patch of radishes. These are the flamboyant variety is what they're called. And they are really pretty. These are about at the right harvesting size. The flavor of these is phenomenal. It's very, very mild. These aren't spicy at all now. That does go a little bit according to the variety, but it also has to do with the time of year that these were grown. Like these grew through cold, freezing nights, and that makes a huge difference. If you've ever grown radishes through the summer and you didn't like them because they were too spicy and like pithy and hot, you need to grow them when it's colder, because they're really good. Now these rows are where the tomatoes will be. And of course, I've got the tomato rows, and then I have these arches, which will primarily hold things like personal sized melons. This arch has Malabar spinach, and it's just starting to come up here. And you can also say, here's some volunteer tomatoes. Here are some volunteer zinnias. There's another tomato, another tomato. And I just hate pulling these out. It just breaks my heart. Sometimes I'll move them if I can. Like this has a dark purple stem. That's probably some blueberry tomatoes or something. So like I may move some of these. But that Malabar spinach I want here. I was hoping that that would come back this year, and I'm glad to see that it is. Hopefully some will pop up on this side too, but I'll just wait, and whatever Malabar spinach reseeds, I'll move some of them over here. Here is parsley, which has been here for a couple of years. And here you can see tons of volunteers. I've got zinnias, tomatoes, marigolds, all in here. Lots of little baby seedlings. Look at all those marigolds, lots of them. I like to leave volunteer plants if I can because they're so healthy. They always outgrow the things that I plant that year or that I start. They're so healthy. Obviously, I don't need 8 tomatoes growing within a couple of feet of each other, so I'll end up moving some of them. Some of them will inevitably have to be torn out because they'll hinder what I'm trying to grow in that area. But it's funny because I do have things like this Malabar spinach. I haven't planted Malabar spinach in my garden since the first time I planted it a few years ago because it always just comes back and I move it to where I want it. Same thing, there's these zinnias here at the bottom of this. They've been growing there for a couple of seasons, and they're this massive coral zinnia. It grows like 7 feet tall, and they always grow right there because they just keep coming back. And I saved the seeds of them, but I've never started any. And as soon as I saw those pop up, I was like, yes, they're back. Down here on the end, I have a nice long row of rainbow chard, looking really pretty. And I'll be planting all of these tomatoes here very soon. Of course, at that point, I'll rip out all these weeds and mulch just really heavily so they won't keep coming back. Down here is the mint and lemon balm bed, and then I've got several different rose bushes down here. Mostly in these square beds, I try to do things that are pretty hands-off. That'll just kind of add beauty back here to the back of the garden. All these roses, when they bloom, it's going to be gorgeous. So that's pretty much it up here in the front garden for now. Now, throughout this garden, in different places, I've already put in quite a few seeds. By the time we do another garden tour, those will all be up and growing, as well as having a lot of stuff transplanted. So lots of stuff on the horizon. Let's go back to the back because there are some new things going on back there. Maybe not a lot to see, but there is at least progress to show. So my front garden, my big raised bed garden, like I said, is very much planted in like a potager style, incorporating beauty, just making a reflective space, bringing in a lot of pollinators. And after building that garden, we started back here in the back, and this is more production than potager. Now, I have learned to really love the beauty of rows and kind of a more orderly look. And I'm also feeding a big family, and so this makes really filling out our food a lot easier. So this is where I'm growing a lot of the things that we're going to store, where I tend to grow varieties that might not be as interesting, whereas in the front I do lots and lots of heirlooms and unusual things and lots of experiments. Back here, more is about filling our freezers, filling our pantries, and filling my kids' bellies. So here is, I've got a long row of elephant garlic here. Lots of garlic in these rows, and then down here on the end, more onions and shallots and leeks. And this is due for another layer of mulch for a good weeding, but I'm just amazed that this made it as well through the winter. Because I planted all this stuff in January, and my pigs got into it, my chickens got into it. It was just one thing after another, assault after assault. And then we had the coldest winter we've had in Arkansas in 100 years, and they're all just completely fine. You can't even tell that there was any issue. Over here next to that, now this is my no-dig garden. Those beds are also no-dig. We established those. And we didn't till this or anything this year. We just laid down another layer of compost. Went ahead and mulched that to avoid weeds taking over. Back in this area is where I'm going to be planting lots of melons, like watermelons, and probably some winter squash back here where it can really ramble and take over. And back in this corner, you can see that that is not prepared yet. It's really weedy, but that's where I'm going to put in some sweet potatoes as soon as we're in the clear out of the frost. Now this bed back here is just kind of a random bed. These are Jerusalem artichokes. They're coming back really well. I started these last year and I didn't harvest any because when I went to dig some of them, they were all still pretty small. So I'm hoping this year we'll get a good harvest. I put them in a little later last year. Look at this lovely view. This is going to be so massively different in such a short little while. This will just be an explosion of life. Here, I've got my potatoes in, finally. I was a little late. It was kind of bothering me. And by late, I don't mean actually late. I replant potatoes in like July and harvest them again in the fall. So it's not really late per se. It's just later than I could have started. I could have planted them as early as like the beginning of March. And I didn't get them in until well into April, but it's okay. We'll still get a good harvest out of this midsummer. Now I've got several mounds of potatoes here. These are all planted with a variety of different potatoes, but on the back, we were gonna extend this further and decided instead to stop. And I'm actually gonna flatten this out and do my cutting sunflowers back here in this back area because I love that backdrop here. And as of right now in the high tunnel, there's not just a ton to see. We haven't really made a lot of progress in here. I guess I can go over this bed on the side that is planted. Now I have been saying for, I don't know, the last few months, or 2 months that these have been in, that these are cheddar cauliflowers. And I thought they were because that's what I wrote on the tag, but apparently I put the tag on the wrong row. These are not cheddar cauliflowers. These are definitely cabbages. They're starting to get heads. And so this is a quarter-view cabbage. I remember that because I remember what I started with the cheddar cauliflowers. Doesn't look like I'm going to be getting any cheddar cauliflower, but I love quarter-view cabbages, so I'm happy to see them. Here I have some other cabbages, red cabbages. Now in the front, I was a little concerned about those brassicas. I'm not 100% sure they'll make it. But back here, I feel like with the shade cloth that we're gonna put on back here, these will probably be just fine as long as the pests don't get them too bad. And you'll notice down in these beds, here's a couple of little Marvel of Four Seasons lettuces. That's because I sowed those here and they didn't come up for a long time, and so I assumed the seeds were old. Put the cabbages in and they decided to grow then. On that side I've got leeks. See, the seeds were not bad. Got little lettuces all underneath there. I will probably move these. I'm gonna let them get a little bit bigger and I'll just scoop them up with some of the soil and the roots and move them to a different place where they can grow. Here I have some Chinese cabbages, Napa cabbages. Really great for kimchi, great sauteed with like Asian dishes. To make different slaws. This is something my kids eat really well. And there are some random other things growing here, like these are beets, these are carrots. Why there are mixed in here, same reason. Some things I thought the seeds were no good because they took so long to germinate, but it was just not warm enough, I guess. This is a really persistent weed that comes back constantly in my garden. Don't want that there. Down the side of this row are it's leeks until it turns into shallots. Down here, these are shallots. I've got quite a few of those growing. I'm actually getting ready to move this. I keep meaning to do it and forgetting until I'm back here making a video. Is a beautiful sage plant that overwintered and is getting ready to blossom, so that's really cool. That'll be really pretty to see. And right here is a calendula, which has just come alive after the soil was amended out here. It's covered in blossoms. So pretty. And I cannot remember what variety of this is. I think it's Ball is what it's called. Ball. Maybe Ball Improved. I'm pretty sure it has Ball in it. That's one seed. Isn't that crazy? So I did an experiment with some tomatoes, moving them out here. Some of them did okay. I just moved them out as seedlings. And I think some are going to make a pretty good recovery. Some definitely shriveled up and died. The smaller ones just didn't transplant. I just don't think they had enough of a root system to transplant well. These are Santiam Determinate tomatoes. And I have some other started plants that I'm just going to plug in these spaces. I have other Determinate tomatoes, and actually these beds are going to have a lot of Determinate tomatoes in them, and then I'm going to also do quite a few peppers out here, lots of peppers, and ground cherries do pretty well out here, probably some eggplants, those did well last year. So as the cold weather things in that bed come out, I will just fill those in with starts. I'm probably going to move my peppers out until like May when it's good and warm so that they can really take off and thrive. If you move them out too early, they'll stunt. And this space is going to look really different by the next time you guys see it in a tour. I mean, you'll see the progress in vlogs, but it's going to look really different, and I'm very, very excited for it. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today on this tour. I think we'll probably skip a week one more time, and probably in May, like mid-May, at the latest, we'll start doing weekly tours because there will be enough change every week to warrant them. When I first started making garden tours, I thought, oh, I'll do them once a month throughout the summer. But I would notice that it was just massive differences just in the matter of 3 or 4 days. The summer, the garden is absolutely bonkers and how fast that it grows. And I just like cannot help but smile massively thinking of it. I'm so happy that we're almost there. Thank you guys again. I bless you. Until next time.